Hey everyone, how are you? My name is Heather Asianbi, and I am your host of our new show called Telling Tall Tales the Right Way. So, what does that mean? Well, basically, it means telling good stories. I mean, how many times? Okay, how many times have you gotten a recommendation from a friend of a friend, acquaintance, doesn't matter, somebody on Facebook you just happen to know, right? Who was like, oh my God, I read this really good book. You have to read it. Or there's this great TV show. You need to watch it. And then you read the book and you're like, maybe. Or maybe you're like, oh my God, this is the best book. Or that's a great TV show. Or what are they talking about, right? Like whatever your reaction is, we get referrals all the time about what good books and good TV shows there are, right? But what I think is the reason we recommend books, TV shows, and movies is because they're great stories, right? They tell a great story. So, what are great stories? What do they entail? That's what we're going to talk about. So, this whole show, not today, but this whole show, every episode is going to be we're going to focus on books and specific episodes of TV shows. Now, um, I don't see what's a good way to say this. Like through lines, right? So it like let's say there's a series, right? So what's the through line of the series, and does it work? Does it not? Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. And we might we are actually going to talk about potentially whole seasons of TV shows and whether they work or not. And I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. Okay. I know lots of discussion about why season 7 and 8 didn't work, but we are going to dig into it and from my not so humble opinion about why. Okay, so who am I? Why should you listen to me? So what I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself is that I am a best-selling editor, which basically means I edit books and they hit the bestseller list. Not because of editing necessarily, because obviously this is all marketing and people who buy it, blah blah blah, right? But at any rate, I'm really really good at what I do. I've also edited dozens and dozens of children's books because they're just a joy. Oh, they're so joyous. And let me tell you something. Oop, there we go. 3 of the 4 books on that slide, not Hello Coco is the only one that doesn't rhyme. The other ones rhyme. And let me tell you something. Authors who can rhyme, I bow to you because that is a skill. Whew, that is a skill. And then I've also been a journalist for what feels like 100 years. And I love being a journalist. And these are the organizations, there we go, along the bottom of the slide. Daily Herald newspaper, which covers like the half moon around O'Hare Airport in Chicago, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the Patch Networks of news websites, and Racine County Eye, which is actually a news website I co-founded and co-owned for 4 years, and now I am back freelancing. So I tell you all that because I want you to understand that like my skills and experience come from a lifetime of storytelling. My career has been all stories all the time, just different ones, right? So what we need to talk about now is I want to briefly define what the elements are for every good story. And yes, every good story has them. It doesn't matter if you're an adult book, fiction or non. It doesn't matter if you're a TV series, a movie, or a children's picture book, right? It's just how it's applied is always just a little different. So the elements of every great story include a beginning, middle, and end, right? It seems super duper obvious. Of course, there's the beginning, middle, and end. If you sit down and talk to your friend, like if we were sitting down right now having a conversation, me telling you a story about Game of Thrones has a beginning, middle, and end, right? I will talk about who's part of the story, what's the point of the story, where it takes place, when it takes place, why the story even starts, like what kicks it off, right? And then how it all comes together or falls apart. There's going to be a conflict and resolution, which honestly is just a super fancy way of saying problem solution, right? So we know there's a problem, and then the solution is the reader or the viewer's payoff, the solution. We get well-drawn characters with character growth, and then we get a fully realized world where rules, as they are constructed by the author, like that's how people operate in the world that the story takes place. Tone and style, which is, is it dark and moody? Is it bright and sunny and comedic, right? And then consistency and congruency is how all of that stuff that I just told you about is applied to the story in a consistent and congruent manner. So, all right, so let's talk about what that means a little bit. Okay. Let's use, I'm trying to think of a really good example. Dragons. Dragons fly, right? They fly. Are they big? Are they small? Color, like there's certain aspects of dragons that I think we've all come to kind of accept. Whether or not dragons were real, we can talk about that a different day. I don't know. I kind of think they were though, because right, like think about this. Every culture pretty much around the globe features a dragon of some kind. Like when there's archaeological finds, we see dragons. Wouldn't you think dragons are real? And oh my God, if they were. Okay, I'm sure I know I'm not the only one who not so secretly longs for a dragon, but at any rate, so the accepted lore around a dragon, right? Flies, breathes fire, whatever. The general things is that respected, and or are dragons introduced in a story with a different set of characteristics, and then do those characteristics flow through an entire story, whether it's a standalone book, a series, a movie, a series of movies, doesn't matter, right? Dragons. What are we doing with them? Okay. So when you think about your beginning, your middle, and your end, right? Clear beginning. How do we get into the story? We're getting into the story. And then as the action ramps up, that's your conflict, right? Your conflict starts to come in. Conflict starts to come in as the action's ramping up. Whoop, and then we get to the top of the curve. And this is the messy middle, right? This is the messy middle. This is where the meat of the story takes place. And this is why it's really important that the story has very well-defined who's in the story. What roles do they play? Think about it like the Academy Awards, which frankly, I don't watch anymore because they so rarely feature movies that I've actually seen, right? Like there are always these, anyway, okay, that's a topic for a different day. Okay. Academy Award. We have Best Actress, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and then an underlayer of characters, right? So that's what we need to know. Who are these people? What is the primary point of the story? What's the plot? What is the overarching plot? When you're talking about Harry Potter, for instance, the overarching theme of the entire series, right, is Lord Voldemort had kind of taken over the wizarding world. And then he went to go kill Harry because of a prophecy. And that's what kicks off. Oh, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But that's the why, right? Like, why does the whole action of the story start? Lord Voldemort goes to kill Harry, ends up killing his parents. And then according to the wizarding world rules, established by the author. When a wizard or a witch turns 10, they get a letter, they go to Hogwarts. Okay? That's what happened to Harry, right? So that's the primary point of the whole story, and then why the action gets started. Where does this all take place? So it all takes place primarily in England. Hogwarts is the school up in Scotland. It's a 3.5 hour train ride, and they have to go to, platform 9 3/4. That's a whole thing. But the locations are so well described that it kind of feels like you're there, right? And then when does this take place? When does the story take place? Because a lot of times that plays into why we have to, not like why we have to, but like it plays into what we expect. So like any story taking place in modern times, we assume there are cell phones and electricity and cars and all the political upheaval in the world and trashy TV shows, whatever. You get fast food on every corner, all that stuff, right? But if you're a show like Game of Thrones, which even though it is total fantasy and it takes place on an Earth-like planet, it establishes itself firmly in a time frame because there is no electricity. Nobody's fighting with guns. They fight with swords. They ride horses. They ride the aforementioned dragons. If you're, Targaryens. They dress in very much more, and the society is set up more like medieval stuff, right? So that's the win time frame. But also we need to know how do the converging points of the storyline for the main characters, the storylines for the supporting characters, how do they all come together to form a cohesive story? That's the how. So we have who, what, where, when, why, and how. Okay. Also, so when I was telling you about beginning, middle, and end, there's the conflict and the resolution, right? So when you think about the bell curve, here, I'll just show you because that's a little easier. So here's the bell curve. And I know when we saw this in school, we were like, oh my God, test grades. I know is that just me? Because I was really not a good student, like facts. I found out why though, because ADHD was a thing, but when I was a kid, it wasn't a thing. And I was just diagnosed last year when I was like 53 and a half. So that's like a light bulb going off, but I digress. Okay. Conflict and resolution. Problem, solution. In Harry Potter, there is the overall conflict of Lord Voldemort hanging over everything. And how do we solve the problem of Lord Voldemort? But then there are 7 books, and each one of those books has a primary conflict. There are also lots of secondary and even third level conflicts in them, depending on the characters, right? But they all feed together. Each book feeds together into the larger picture, right? And the resolutions also all come together, okay? Now, when we're talking about a singular story, like Where the Crawdads Sing, the conflict and the resolution are going to be fairly contained, okay? And it's not a short book. I mean, it's a substantial novel, which gives the author plenty of time to kind of pull the conflict along, right? It pulls the conflict along and then provides a payoff. Okay? Does that make sense? And I really want you also use the comments because I really want to understand what stories do you think are amazing? What are your favorite stories? Why are they your favorite stories? And then if you have suggestions on any books or TV series, episodes of TV series, I definitely want to see that. Okay. So next, all right. I wanted to keep the slide up because I definitely want to show you what amazing character growth, examples of character growth. These are all from TV series. Luke Cage, starts out as that's Luke Cage, boop, 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 right there. Luke Cage starts out as just a regular guy who gets out of prison. He is indestructible basically because his skin is impenetrable. He just wants to help people. But by the end of the series, as it aired on Netflix, he was a crime boss. So how does he get from do-gooder to crime boss? That is a character growth arc, right? Issa D from Insecure, when she starts out, she's a hot mess. But by the end of the series, she has realized that she is worthy and has always been worthy of the image of the life she saw for herself in her head. And so she becomes this badass businesswoman who has, the life that she wants for herself, the love that she wants and deserves, right? She's got it all. Sansa Stark, she's the one in the fluffiness, for those of you who are not familiar. Game of Thrones, when she starts out, she is just, she's a young girl. She's about 13 or so. And then over the course of the series, she experiences tremendous growth. A lot of it is due to trauma, frankly, because some horrific things happen to her. But by the end of Game of Thrones, she is also a badass. She is the badass queen of the North. And people recognize her power and her authority, right? That's a great thing for a woman in general, but especially a female character. Regina, she of the glorious black hair and red lip, started out the series of Once Upon a Time as just like the evil queen from Snow White. And at the end, she realizes all she wants is her family. And that's where she finds her happiness. And then we have our friend Steven down there with the bat from Stranger Things. When he starts out, he's just kind of like a dorky jock, douchey kind of guy, right? He's in high school, got all the girls, he's cute, dresses, at the height of 80s fashion, which we can talk about that all day long, but we're not gonna, because let's let bygones be bygones. But anyway, so Steve Carrington, by the time the series ends, he is a hero in his own right. And he has chosen to allow himself to be vulnerable and to, be friends with the nerds, right? He saves the day more often than not. So he is a true hero, which is really kind of exciting, right? So all of this goes into building the world, right? So when J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter, she constructed very specific rules for the universe in which there is a wizarding world for wizards and witches. And it exists alongside that of muggles. That's non-magical people, for those of you unfamiliar with Harry Potter. And there are very specific rules to how the muggle world behaves, which is our world, like planes, trains, automobiles, cell phones, electricity, blah, 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 right? And then there are very specific rules that the wizarding world exists under, which is they don't really require electricity. They don't require cars. They don't require those things at all. Because, they have magic. But what is also great about that world is just like our actual real lives, like got up this morning and brushed my teeth and went for a walk kind of day, is that the individuals within the wizarding world also have their own talents. So some might be better at potions and some are better at spell casting, right? No different than some of us are better at math and others are better at science or editing and writing, right? Like we all have our own talents. Those same rules apply in Harry Potter. Now, in Game of Thrones, that world is so specific. And if you notice at the beginning of every episode, like this 3D map kind of comes to life where like the cities pop up and grow. Those are the cities that each episode takes place. So there might be Dragonstone or Winterfell, The Wall, King's Landing, right? And each of these cities has its own culture. A lot of times they have their own language, fashion, depending on the climate. Can't be at the Wall wearing flimsy, scarfy things like you do at King's Landing because the Wall is freezing. You will freeze to death. Right? Well, not you, characters. So you can't do that, right? So each place is very specific, okay? And then from there, we take all of that stuff and we apply it to tone and style. So I'm going to bring the slide back up because I really want you, I want to make sure I'm defining this so everybody really understands like where I'll be coming from. So tone and style is basically how creators want the audience to feel emotionally and intellectually, right? Or feel and think. How do we want them to feel and what do we want them to think? And creators use a lot of different tools, language, whether you have an accent or you're, from a different part of the US or maybe a different part of the world, right? Editing is a big one, like how scenes are cut together. Or in a book, does the editor hold the author to the rules that the author has established for that world, whatever those are? Music is another one. You might not hear that so much, for books, but movies and TV, music evokes response. Think about the beginning of Jaws. Every time you hear that, you're like, oh God, where's the shark? Okay. And then visually, how do things look? Do they adhere to the culture, the mores of the location? In Harry Potter, like this has never happened. Okay. How often have you read a book that's been turned into a movie? Then you go see the movie and you're like, that is not at all how I thought that would look. Like that doesn't even make sense. Or maybe you like what a director did or a creator did with it. In Harry Potter, I read the description for Quidditch, which is basically soccer/rugby played in the air on broomsticks. And then when I saw it in the first movie, I was like, oh, they took it right out of my head and put it on the screen. Like, what? Yeah, it was super cool. It does make me also want, but broomsticks look highly uncomfortable, even with the little seat thing. It looks like a really hard bicycle seat. We all know that's not comfortable. Oh, okay, sorry. I digress. But then with consistency and congruency, we have to decide as viewers and readers, how well did the creator adhere to the genre? Comedy, drama, horror, whatever it is, right? Did they follow the rules they established? And did they or did they not leave dangling threads, right? So that's consistency and congruency. So on this season, my first season of telling tall tales the right way, which I'm very excited. Okay. We're going to be talking about Harry Potter, Where the Crawdads Sing, Game of Thrones, True Blood, Money Heist, Mexican Gothic, and The Water Dancer. So Where the Crawdads Sing, Mexican Gothic, and The Water Dancer are novels. Harry Potter, we're going to focus specifically on book 7 as it pertains. I'm trying to think of how to say this without giving anything. Never mind. We're just going to talk about book 7. Okay. So thank you for joining me. I'm excited. I'm really excited about this. And so please, I hope to see you next week. Again, use the comments. I want to know what you think about the elements of every great story. Have you even thought about them in such a, like defined manner? And then what are your favorite stories? Do you have suggestions you'd like me to cover? Let me know. All right. Thanks very much. And I will see you next time.